Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome back to another week and another episode of the podcast. Welcome to episode 146, and I am very excited about this episode. This episode is titled Stay in Peace, the self-care episode. For anyone who has listened to the podcast, you hear me say at the end of each episode, stay in peace. And some may wonder, why, Nora, do you say that and what does that mean? And so what it ultimately is me encouraging you to do just what I say, which is to stay in peace. Peace, which is free from mental distress, free from physical distress or physical disease, being in peace, being mentally and physically at ease. And I say that each episode because I know that this world works so hard to disturb our peace, to reduce our peace, to interrupt our peace from the content that we consume on television, in the radio, in magazines, in the newspaper, online and in social media, to even the foods that we eat, the foods that are modified, the foods that have nutrition robbed from it, the food that has additives that are carcinogenic that we're consuming, the way food is marketed to our children. If anyone's been in the supermarket aisle, you see that the cereal on the bottom aisle are the ones that are the most colorful, also the ones that have the least nutritional value. They're the ones that have the most sugar in them. They're at the bottom aisle so that they can attract the eye of our children the same way they design toys and toy packaging in such a way so that children can be attracted to it. And by eating and consuming highly sugar food, highly salted foods, we know that depletes health. So when I say at the end of every episode, stay in peace, it is me encouraging you to consider the things that we do, the thoughts that we think, the foods that we consume, the behaviors that we engage in that can contribute or deplete our peace. And for me, peace is literally my religion. I'm a Muslim. Islam means peace. Peace is my religion. It is my way of life, and it is my message. No matter who I am speaking to, if I'm speaking with young women on valuing themselves, making good choices, if I'm speaking to a group of elementary students and I'm helping them understand right from wrong, through this podcast and the information that I share here and the ideas that we get from the great guests that we have, the ultimate objective for me for this podcast is to establish peace personally, with individuals, in our families, and in our community. And we know that our community is certainly has safety issues. There's certainly disruptions to our peace. There can be chaos when people are dissatisfied and disadvantaged, disenfranchised. So for me to have this podcast, to have any platform, I have to share that which I have to share. And it is a message of peace. And so I say that this is the self-care episode. In fact, I will tell you, to be completely transparent, I was visiting, I had a doctor's appointment, seeing my optometrist. And as you know, Dr. West, who is a previous guest on the podcast, she is my personal optometrist. And she was asking me about the podcast, and she said, you really should do a self-care episode. And I thought that is an excellent idea. As we are closing out 2020, coming into a new year, what better than for me to sit in at this microphone and leave out 2020 with a message of peace, with a message encouraging each and every one of you who listens to engage in some kind of self-care, considering everything that we have been through in the year 2020 and what a very trying year 2020 has been for all of us. We should do what we can to cope with the COVID stress. And in addition to the COVID stress, in terms of the way the disease or the virus has impacted our families, the health of this nation, but even economically, right? And how this has impacted folks and their employment, how this has impacted folks and their housing and security, and how this has impacted our students and their ability to learn in the classroom, or some of them are forced out of the classroom and have to learn remotely, and that brings its own challenges. So what a great idea. And I accept my assignment from my doctor to talk in this episode about self-care. Now, just backing up, as I said, peace should be our ultimate objective in life. Not just earning money, not just looking for prestige. If we don't have peace with our money, if we don't have peace with our prestige, then we really don't have anything. And I can say if any of us have been sick, have been ill, have had any significant injury, you know that having our health, having our mental fitness, there is nothing like it. And there is no amount of money that can ease the discomfort of not being healthy. So having peace in our lives as it pertains to our health, as it pertains to our mentality and mindset, that is something that is priceless. And for us to have peace and to have peace as an objective, we have to recognize that our mental and physical are tied together and interwoven. When we have good thoughts and good behaviors, they impact our personal well-being. When we have negative thoughts or unconstructive behaviors, they too impact our personal well-being physically and mentally. And so what I want from my audience and for the families and loved ones of my audience is for each of us to enjoy peace, which is security, contentment. It's quiet of mind. That is what I want for each and every listener. And there are keys or steps that we can engage in to achieve or stay in peace. The first thing I'll say is control what you can. You know, we can't control the way COVID-19 is impacting the country and the world. We don't have control over that. We may not have control over our jobs and our employers moving us to remote or furloughing us or forcing us out and firing us or laying us off. We may not have control over our children being pushed out of the schools and learning at home remotely. But there are some things that we can control. So the one thing and the first thing is we have to find effective ways to manage the stress that we have, because this certainly can be a stressful time for us. And we must do good to ourselves. And I've seen on some of the talk shows, folks talking about having their COVID cocktails and, at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock or maybe 12 o'clock for some, meeting up on Zoom or any other platform where folks can get together virtually and having cocktails. And it's become a joke and people are laughing about it. And we know that in some accounts, when states have shut down, they've kept the liquor stores open as essential businesses. But alcoholism is a real thing, and it is not good for anyone to be encouraged to consume alcohol on a daily basis, on an increased basis, at a time when they experience increased stress. We should not use alcohol to manage our stress. We should not use alcohol, drugs, cigarettes to manage our stress, because what we'll find ourselves is being dependent on alcohol, drugs, or cigarettes when we're feeling stressful. I mean, just think about how television kind of trains us to think that alcohol is our go-to or a cigarette is our go-to when we're stressed. Someone has a hard day at work on the television show or in the movie. What do? They pour themselves a glass of cognac or whatever. They sit down and take a deep sigh and have a beer, right? So we are kind of programmed in this culture to fall back on alcohol and cigarettes or even drugs to cope with stress, to cope with difficult circumstances. But I want to encourage you that we must manage our stress, but we must manage our stress with constructive behaviors, which can include reading. It can include walking or some kind of exercise, even for 20 minutes a day. Take a walk. Talking to a family friend, talking to a counselor if necessary, but finding something that you generally enjoy doing and that you can do and using it as an outlet. Get a coloring book and get some crayons or get some colored pencils and meditate, or, just find something that does not deplete from your health, that does not destroy your health, that will not create a dependency. So now not only do we have the COVID stress, not only are we concerned about going out in public and, I forgot my mask, I got to go back to the car, having gloves, making sure we're physically distancing, thinking about, is my employer going to lay me off? Oh, the children are home doing remote learning. I can't keep up. And on top of it, I have a new alcohol addiction issue. So think about ways that you can manage your stress with something that you like to do. Next, I'll say, as it pertains to remote learning, don't overtax yourself and don't overtax your children. I am grateful that my children are older and their remote learning is something that they can facilitate on their own with very little assistance or support needed from me. However, many of us have very young children, and we are trying to balance their remote learning with our work responsibilities if we're working from home, and if you're not working from home, ensuring that if our children are going to child care centers, that their remote learning is happening at the child care centers. So I'll say I have even heard of teachers becoming frustrated or reporting to parents that their children, instead of being on camera during the remote learning session while they're at the child care center, they're playing, they're distracted. Well, when you think about what it's like for a child to be at a child care center instead of in the classroom, and they're in a classroom with other remote learners, each student has their own designated time to begin remote learning. And when it is not their time, then maybe they're coloring, maybe they're playing with a toy at the same time that your child is due for his or her remote learning. So they're looking over at the other children playing. They're talking to the other children who are playing. And it can be challenging for the staff at the remote learning center to manage all of the children and all of their classrooms that they're supposed to be in virtually. It can be a lot. So I can understand how frustrating it is getting any call from the school, let alone at a time where you're trying to keep your job, hoping that you're not going to get laid off. You have your child at a child care center and you're already concerned about exposure to or potential exposure to COVID-19. And then you have the teacher calling and complaining about your child and his or her distractions. Whether you're at home with your child and you're facilitating the remote learning, or if your child is in a resource center or a child care center and engaging in remote learning in that way, don't overtax your children. Don't overtax yourself. My best advice is to do the best that you can. Support your children the best that you can. If there are concerns at the resource center, the child care center, the recreation center, then you can share that with the administrator of the center. But don't put extra pressure on yourself. Don't put extra pressure on your children. I mean, think about it. Imagine a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old expected to stare at a computer and be engaged at a computer more so than they're engaged with the people that they're in the room with. That's very difficult for any of us, being quite honest, let alone our little learners, our small learners. So do not overtax yourself. Let the school or the teacher know what limitations you have, what concerns you may have, but don't overstress over the academics. Support your children the best that you can. Support yourself the best that you can. And if the teacher has standards that you think are just unfair, then speak to a school administrator. They have to work with us. They have to work with the families. So be kind and be patient with yourself and with your children. Another tip that I will share is create a daily routine for yourself, which includes eating, right? I know how it can become easy to graze, right? When I say graze, I think about cows in a pasture and they just, graze around the pasture, eating grass or whatever it is that cows eat. We don't want to be like that, right? So we want to set regimented times to eat for ourselves and our children. If you eat breakfast, if your children are used to breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then make sure you have that at those designated times. Discourage our children from just sitting around the house and snacking because they're bored. We shouldn't sit around the house and snack because we're bored, because that too creates another unhealthy habit. And many have gained weight over the time that we have had the state shutdowns, depending on the state that you're in, or the times that you've been home remotely working, or your children are out of school and they're more sedentary. They can't go and participate in their team sports. And so create a routine around food and maintain that routine. But also create a routine around the house. Make sure that, the children are getting up at a certain time. Make sure you're getting up at a certain time. Maybe you have a designated time to do exercise or to do meditation or to take a walk, right? Maybe there's a designated time to stop all work, right? Some folks who are working remotely have bosses that expect them to work even at 7 and 8 o'clock, even though if they were in the office, they would leave at 5, right? So we have to create boundaries around that. We have to create a routine so that we can have some kind of a system to our daily lives. So we're not always guessing about what's next, or so that we don't get too sedentary. Create a daily routine. And I believe that this will help, especially with those who do have small children, because even our young children need routine, and that's very, very important for their health and for their development. So in addition to managing your stress, in addition to not overtaxing yourself and your children with the remote learning, in addition to creating a routine, it might be a good time to tackle a new home project. And listen, I'm not saying you need to be an overachiever, right? You don't have to clean out the whole garage, but maybe you have more time to tackle some things that you didn't before because there was so much to do. There were so many meetings that you were going to. The children had piano lessons, and then you had to go to soccer practice, and then you had basketball practice, right? So now maybe there's much more time for us to tackle some things around our homes. Maybe you want to rearrange your furniture. Maybe you want to paint that room. Get it done now. If you can afford it, if it's within your budget, Get it done now. And there are so many things that you can find online where you can make changes on a shoestring budget. Everything doesn't require a lot of money. It doesn't require a lot of expenses. Go online and find those websites that can advise you on how to do some fixing up or do some interior designing on a shoestring budget. There's so much online and you can find that. And then, create an atmosphere that you are comfortable with, right? So many of us are spending much more time in our homes, in our bedrooms, in our offices, in our living rooms. So make sure that it is a room or a place that you feel comfortable being in. Maybe you didn't have time before, but you certainly may have the time now. And lastly, I'll add, get your checkups. Whether it's a dental appointment. And what I've been seeing and reading on the news, that a lot of people have neglected their dental cleanings during this season. And I will tell you that our oral health is so tied into our general health, right? Whether it's heart disease and diabetes, make sure that we and our children are getting our oral exams on a regular basis. This is very, very important. Make sure that you're going and getting a physical. If your doctor doesn't think that you need it now and your doctor is doing a virtual visit with you and the doctor wants to push it back for a few months, but make sure you're checking in with your doctor. If you have to have lab work done, if you have to have some imaging done, make sure you're following up with your regular checkups. There's so much that we can find in a simple blood test, right? If you're feeling more tired, you could just be anemic, right? And that can be an easy fix with a change in diet or an iron supplement. But we won't know it. And so we'll be feeling that general malaise and that tiredness. And we could think, oh, it's just the COVID. And then we could think it's, it's a depression. It could just be an iron deficiency. It could just be a vitamin D deficiency. But without those routine labs, we may not know what's going on internally. So get your checkups. Don't try to be an overachiever in this time. This is a very taxing time for all of us. Listen to what your body is saying. Pay attention to the signs that can warn us of emotional or physical overload. Pay attention to yourself. And, more than ever, be patient with yourself. And it can be a stressful time. And so I will go back and say, if there is a need for you to speak to a clinician or a counselor, then make that appointment. Make that appointment and talk to someone. Folks are very stressed. We just came through holidays, and we know that holidays can also be a very, very stressful time. But what greater time than now for us to practice self-care? Be easy on yourself. Be patient with yourself. Be easy on our children and be patient with them and our loved ones and those who we are sharing the household with. And I want to encourage you to wear your mask and to practice physical distancing. And in addition to that, eat well. Eat your fruits and your vegetables. Get fresh air. Take walks. Because we can support a healthy immune system by what we're consuming and avoiding consuming things that can be depleters of our health. So I encourage you, be good to yourself and be good to others, and be in peace. Be in peace. And so, as I said in episode 145, this is the last episode of 2020. It has certainly been a year that has been unlike any other. If we just reflect back to the fires that were ravaging out west, and we have the pandemic that's happening, and the pandemic has caused an economic crisis in this country. And, with the pandemic and any public health issue, we know that our Black and our brown population is going to be disproportionately affected, and we're seeing that. It's been a very trying and taxing year. Think good thoughts, do good things, and be good to yourself and be good to others. Again, this is the last episode of 2020. It has certainly flown by. I hope that you have found wisdom in this podcast over the last year. I hope that you have been inspired in this podcast. I hope that you have found relief and ease in this podcast with some of the things that you've heard. And I am really looking forward to 2021, and the month of January will be a month that I will take off. Usually I take off in the month of December, but I wanted to keep going through the month of December and just take a short break in the month of January. And I will be replaying some really great episodes, beginning actually with the episode of the podcast that I did with Dr. West. It was a very, very insightful interview. I really appreciated her coming on and sharing her journey, and I learned so much from it, and I'm sure that you will as well. So that will be the first episode that you will hear in 2021, and I am eagerly preparing for this new year that's coming, and I will have great guests for you to share wonderful bits of wisdom from their own experiences and their journey. So I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. It is always a privilege and a pleasure for you to join me each and every week. And if you find that this podcast has value to you, I encourage you to share it with your family, with your friends, on social media. You can follow me at Nora Speaks Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And I look forward to seeing you on the other side in 2021. But until then, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.